Only One Mommy, the story of Lisa Miller. We're going to be talking about today on Faith and Freedom. I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Joining me is Rena Lindevaldsen, the author of the book, and also special counsel for Liberty Counsel, and one who has been litigating that case when it was in the litigation phase for a number of years. Welcome to Faith and Freedom.
Good morning.
We want to talk to you about this book that just came out. It's called The Lisa Miller Story, Only One Mommy. And the subtitle is A Woman's Battle for Her Life, Her Daughter, and Her Freedom. Now, you have had a lot of experience through the litigation phase up through, I think, 2009 with the Lisa Miller story. It's a complicated legal battle between two states, Virginia and Vermont, with regards to their laws pertaining to same-sex civil unions. And then in the midst of that, of course, is Lisa Miller's biological daughter, Isabella. But beyond that legal issue that we've talked about in the past a number of times on Faith and Freedom, what ultimately brought you to write this book? Because it really doesn't focus on the legal issue. It focuses on the underlying issue that she was dealing with, that is the struggle in and out of homosexuality.
Sure. And the book does, for those who've been wondering how the court ruled the way it did, it briefly explains that in the book as well. But for the most part, after speaking with Lisa for several years, she wanted to have her story told. She wanted other people who were struggling with same-sex attractions to understand that you have a choice, to understand that you may be in this relationship now, but you can leave this relationship, acknowledging that it's not easy. And so through that, we tell a story from birth all the way through to her entering a relationship with her same-sex partner, leaving that relationship, and then what happened to her after that. So it's to be a message of hope for those struggling with same-sex attractions and a message to the church of what they need to do and should do to help those struggling with same-sex attractions.
Now, Lisa didn't grow up thinking that she was attracted to women. How did that come about in her life where that ultimately was a transition point where she ended up in a same-sex relationship with another woman?
Sure. And Lisa's story is a situation of early on, her mom was dealing with some psychiatric issues. Her parents split up. And through that, Lisa explains that by the time she graduated from high school, she was involved in 6 different addictions, from eating disorders to diet pills to alcohol to drugs, pornography. She just was a range of activities trying to figure out how to cope with life, really. And then when she got out of high school, she actually met a man, was married during college. That was a failed relationship after a few years. Again, just not focusing on Christ, but focusing on our selfish needs and additional addictions. And she was eventually hospitalized after she attempted suicide during that relationship, and a counselor in the hospital suggested to her that perhaps she should try a relationship with a woman because relationship with men hadn't been working for her. And she had a coworker at that time that was also involved in same-sex relationships, so it was something that intrigued her, and she followed up on that, and because of that, counselor found herself in same-sex relationship and ultimately with Janet Jenkins.
So up until the time that she went to this counselor for some of the other issues that she was dealing with at the time of her relationship that failed with her husband, she had not been dating other women. She had not experienced attractions to other women. She was not thinking that she was a lesbian. But the counselor actually essentially said this issue, this relationship with guys, at least this man that you were with, husband, didn't work out so well, so why don't you experiment in other ways with other women? And that's the first time that she began to think about a relationship with another woman.
Absolutely. And at the same time, Satan had used someone else in her life, a coworker, to plant the seed of just intrigue and something new. And she had a friend that was talking about her same-sex relationship. Again, Lisa wasn't considering it, wasn't exploring it, but that, coupled with the tragedy in her life, coupled with a counselor saying this might be good for you, led her to give this a try.
And then, so how did she ultimately come to meet Janet Jenkins?
She actually met Janet Jenkins while Lisa was at an AA meeting. She had gone to AA meetings previously. Her mom had just passed away tragically.
So she had another tragic episode in her life.
Absolutely. So she returned to AA meetings just to help cope with what was going on in her life, and she met Janet Jenkins there, and Janet pursued her through those meetings. So
Janet was also one of the people in AA struggling with alcohol addiction.
Yes.
And so those two met each other. Janet was, at the time, already involved in the lesbian lifestyle. This was not something new to her. Is that correct?
Yes, and at that time, Lisa had already been in one other short relationship. So Janet wasn't her first. Janet, I think, was her second relationship. The first one was very short-lived, but Janet was the one that lasted for several years. But Janet was actively involved in the homosexual lifestyle.
And then, of course, after they got together, they ended up having Lisa ended up having a child through artificial insemination, Isabella. And then the two, in 2000, after Vermont passed the nation's first same-sex civil union law, they traveled from Virginia to Vermont to get that same-sex civil union law and then came back to Virginia.
Yeah, and so many of these states that are changing the understanding of what family and marriage is, there's no residency requirement. You can go to Vermont, as they did for a weekend, enter into a same-sex civil union, come back to your home state, and then, as we'll see in the years that came after that, wreak havoc in Virginia of how are they going to deal with a relationship that their laws say don't exist and they don't recognize.
And then, of course, in Virginia, Lisa later gave birth to Isabella. They went back to Vermont for a period of time. And then how was it that the relationship ultimately broke up after they went back to Vermont?
Yeah, the relationship broke up because Lisa finally listened to God, frankly. When Lisa was pregnant with Isabella, she was on bed rest because it was a very difficult pregnancy, and the doctors didn't even think Isabella would be born. And during that time, Lisa explains in this book, through her story, that she actually started praying to God. God reminded her of all the Bible verses she'd learned when she went to church as a child. And she made a deal with God, essentially. If you deliver this child healthy, I will leave this relationship. Now, Lisa didn't do that right away when Isabella was born, but within a year after that, she did leave that relationship, actually through an acquaintance, just point blank one day at lunch said, when are you going to stop doing what you're doing? And right after that, Lisa left.
Yeah, go back to that moment for just a brief time. I remember talking to Lisa Miller. This was a number of years ago while the case was still in litigation between Vermont and Virginia. And she talked about this friend of hers. And I think they were having lunch or they were having some kind of meeting. And the friend just confronted her about what she was doing in her lifestyle. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and it wasn't even a friend, because I think that's important. Lisa was considering beginning to sell some products.
She was a real estate or some kind of
sort
sales.
Of small business sales.
Yeah,
and right. So she met her for the first time for this lunch to introduce Lisa to these products. And during the middle of the lunch, this lady leaned across the table and said, Jesus knows what you're doing. When are you going to stop?
Just out of the blue.
Out of the blue. And she said, I've never done that to anybody before, but God's telling me I have to tell this to you. And that is what caused Lisa, within a matter of weeks, to pack up and leave Vermont and go back to Virginia with her child.
And so she moved back to Virginia, her home state, with Isabella. And then it was after that, of course, that the major blow-up between the two states and the extensive litigation happened up until 2009.
Yeah, and shortly after she moved back, she started going to church, accepted Christ as her Savior, and that caused her to want to stand ground and stand firm for a lifestyle for her daughter that was healthy and godly.
You know, you saw her through a number of years from the beginning of the litigation. I think that began probably in 2004 all the way up to 2009, for about 5 years. Did you see a significant change in her life during that time?
Absolutely. And significantly over that time, I saw a woman who grew in her understanding of her relationship with God, grew in her understanding that she could be dependent on God day by day, and He would take care of her needs. And she often was encouraging us and giving us strength to carry on through the litigation. But she put her whole life in God's hand and trusted Him to take care of her and her daughter.
We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that you observed in Lisa Miller coming through this struggle that maybe many other people have experienced. Maybe you have friends or family, people that you know who are struggling with this issue of same-sex attraction. The book is The Lisa Miller Story, Only One Mommy. It's written by Rena Lindevaldsen, and it's one of our books that we published from the New Revolution Publishers, which is an imprint of Liberty Counsel Action. So this book, New Revolution Publishers, is one of our resources. It's a great resource. For more information, you can contact Liberty Counsel at 1-800-671-1776, or you can go to the website at lc.org and you can order it. It would be a great book for you to read, not only to read yourself, but also to have discussion in your Sunday school. order a number of these books because this is an issue, I think, that, as Rena said, the church needs to deal with. And had the church dealt with it in Lisa's case earlier, maybe she wouldn't have gone through some of the tragedies and struggles that she ultimately ended up going through. The name of the book is The Lisa Miller Story, Only One Mommy. It's the story of Lisa Miller. Call us today at 1-800-671-1776 or go to our website at lc.org and order the book today.